All righty. Well, I reckon we're going to get started here. Thank you so much for joining us. I see we've got one person. We're going to leave this open for other folks that are going to come in. But welcome. We are also recording this program. There's your little asterisk. So get out now if you don't want to be in a recorded program. Thank you for joining us today, this afternoon as we're recording, or this evening or morning when you happen to be watching this. My name's Thomas Becker. I'm one of the admission counselors here at Center College. I work with students all over the eastern half of the country, the Gulf Coast, a stripe across the Midwest, central Kentucky. And I am joined today by my dear friend and esteemed colleague, Johann. I will turn things over to him to introduce himself, and then we'll just get the ball rolling on some conversation. Over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Johann Van Niekerk, but at Center people just call me Johann. And I am an assistant professor in music. And most specifically, I direct the choral ensembles on campus. And then I also teach courses in all different facets of music. The course, Foundations and Worldviews of Music, conducting independent projects, and then also courses on music and politics, music social resistance, hip-hop, more complicated issues within hip-hop. And then I've also taken some students around the world to go and see how music has intersected with larger political and national narratives.
Yes, you have. And we're going to dive into some of those. Your journey to Center took you around the globe, around the country. Tell us a little bit about how you got here. You know, you're well into your time at Center, but you had a very interesting journey before that.
Sure, yes. So I grew up in South Africa, and I spent the first 22 years of my life there. I realized about halfway through high school that I owed it to myself to make music my career. Up until then, I thought it would be a passion project, but I had taken music lessons, piano, violin, etc., from the age of 4 or 5. So it really played very prominently into my life. And then it was joining very high level, but also very community-minded choirs in high school that really opened the doors. And I was able to travel and tour and experience new cultures and new places, different ways of doing things. And so, yes, I was very gung-ho to become a conductor, and I did my undergraduate in piano performance because we couldn't do it in conducting back then. And then I went all around the world to find places to do grad school. I ended up in Philadelphia, where I did my master's, and in Seattle, where I did my doctorate. And Center was my job straight out of grad school. And the day that I interviewed at Center, I actually canceled all my other interviews because I just really wanted to work with the other people in the music program specifically that I had met. And I wanted them to be my friends. They were so cool. So
they're a cool bunch.
yeah. So and I've been here ever since, figuring out how to do the thing and how to do the job, and also bringing my interests and my skill set in a way that I can to the students who may benefit from it.
Yeah, and you have, I know from our conversations, such a wide array of interest areas, and you used the phrase earlier, like a pet project, but your level of depth of interest in those areas is so well honed. I wonder if you could talk to a few of those interest areas. You know, I'm thinking about your time and interest in the Baltic states. I'm thinking about perhaps a center term trip that you may have led recently. those interest areas that are so well developed, I think that there's so many folks who have this perception that a professor just like does one thing and they're super concentrated on this one thing and that's all they do. You fly in the face of that with such confident abandon. Could you say a little bit about the, maybe pick 2 or 3 or 4 of those interest areas that you've really done a lot of work and how you've integrated students into that interest as well?
Oh gosh, it's so funny to hear somebody else word it that way. But yes, throughout my academic career, people have always sort of encouraged me gently and sometimes not so gently to narrow my focus and narrow my interests.
Don't listen to them. We're glad you didn't.
Yes. In the end, my doctoral dissertation was limited to works composed between 1727 and 2007. So
okay,
I was able to narrow it to about a 300-year period. But yes, so with the Baltic states, I've always been really interested in music and social resistance and music and nonviolent resistance, or music as a form of nonviolent resistance. I grew up in South Africa. As a young boy, I saw the transition from the segregation system of apartheid, where the white minority population ruled for 50 years, well, for forever, but specifically the system of apartheid for those 50 years. And I was always very interested and fascinated by the role that music and dancing as forms of protests against that system played. And seeing parallels with that and African American spirituals and the civil rights movement in the United States, and then also this nonviolent, it's called the singing revolution in the Baltic states at the end of the Cold War, where they just started singing forbidden songs and waving flags and just started reclaiming their identity, even though they could be arrested for it. So it's very powerful. And in my doctoral degree, then, to be able to understand that better and being who I am, I decided to study the 3 Baltic languages. And so on top of whatever you have for a doctoral program, I studied Estonian and Latvian and Lithuanian, and some of it I studied in those countries, and I did a lot of research there. And yes, so I was able to take the choir there in 2018. It was my first center term abroad with center students, and we were able to look at the history and the context and really have a form of literacy about that history and culture, and then go to those incredible places in the middle of the winter, in the snow, fairy tale country. But then,
I was going to say winter wonderland, picturesque, I'm sure.
Yes, it's the Europe you imagine as a child. And it was an incredible experience. It was incredible to see something that is so close and just brings me so much joy and that I'm so passionate about, but to see it through their eyes and to be able to show that enthusiasm, but then also to step back a little bit and realize, how can I facilitate this process for you? Something similar just happened this year, where I took students with Dr. Danielle Lalonde to my home country, to South Africa, and I was able to share some of my favorite places and foods and history and culture. There was one day where we actually camped out in my parents' backyard, and my students were walking through my childhood home and looking at my baby pictures a continent away from dad.
Yeah.
And it really is a very unique and a very special moment where you realize, wow, this is my life. This is what I'm passionate about. But how do I share this? How do I contextualize this? And also just, what is somebody else's perspective of this life? It just broadens everything.
Well, and I think, you bring up a good point in terms of being able to share that with students. I think it's really hard. I have experienced like trying to bottle and present center student curiosity in a way that's easily digestible. I remember as a center student myself being so fascinated with the things that my professor would bring to the table in a subject area, or a place we would go, or a thing we would study. And I think that's a pretty special thing at center that you don't often find at other places, is that genuine level of curiosity matched with engagement. And I think we see that really well in center term trips, especially where you're doing this one thing really intently.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's true in your standard classroom too. It's not something that you need to find abroad. I wonder if you could speak to student engagement, student curiosity, especially in the things that you teach.
So the one obvious example of that would be center term, where during the long semesters, the 3-month semesters, you have a more guided, systematic process, right, towards a research project or a written project, and through that process and paper conferences, office hours, etc., you do have this symbiotic relationship, where I always try to open up projects as widely as possible. But you know what you know about me now, right? My parameters are always literally outside of my Zoom screen right now.
Well done.
Thank you. And the adapting to change. I would say, so I give the kind of projects where it's go and find something that you are incredibly interested in. You don't need to know a lot about it, but what are you interested in? And start reading and bring it to me and show me what you've got. And then we can start shaping and honing. And I am somebody who studied Beethoven and Brahms my whole life. I listened to like Dr. Dre and Cypress Hill and D12, but I never academically, investigated it. So for example, in hip hop, for me to academically teach you Dr. Dre will not really make a lot of sense. But if you bring the song by Dr. Dre and say, I'm fascinated by this and this and this, and I'm able to guide you and kind of point you towards, well, this is why the lyrics are interesting. Here is why there are so many layers of meaning to what is happening. Here is what's happening in the music. That becomes a much more productive and powerful and meaningful and lasting experience than me standing in front of a classroom and lecturing about Dr. Dre for an hour. And you may not like Dr. Dre. You may want to talk about, Nicki Minaj. So having the smaller classrooms and having the experiences within the long semester that allow for that, really, I believe is unique to liberal arts, and the way that center does it is very good. But then in the January term, you get to basically see each other every single day, and you get to focus on just one topic, one course, with the same group of people every day. And so the community that is formed in center term for me has always been, whether you are abroad or on campus, second to none. And you basically live and breathe this subject matter. And at least I would hope that the subject matter that I teach would be engaging to the point where that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, and speaking anecdotally, I've heard rave reviews. But before we started this call, you were filling me in on your new plans for this coming center term. So, in the midst of, and we'll get to the transition to remote learning in a little bit, but this class that you're planning is one, I don't want to, it's so interesting. Could you tell us about the course that you are planning for this coming center term?
Sure. So a lot of what I teach is I would start with one topic, and then student feedback would be, no, we want more of this, or no, we want more of this. And then that has led to separate courses where the same students come back and enroll as an elective because they get to discuss it. So this course is going to be on Afrofuturism, which is sci-fi and futurism. The most distilled version of it that people easily grasp is Black Panther. So a foregrounding of Black voices, but also drawing from the heritage and the pride of pre-colonial African kingdoms and this history that we very seldom get to experience and learn on its own. Normally, when we study or learn African history or African American history, it's always in conjunction or in comparison or in conversation with European and North American history, but
Right.
Afrofuturism just foregrounds that culture and that identity. And so it's fascinating and incredible. And in studying sci-fi and depictions of the future, you dig very deep into the roots of these ancient kingdoms and cultural artifacts and art and music and beauty that we don't normally get to interact with. So I'm very excited about it. I've been reading up a lot about it. And so for this specific course, we will look at those kingdoms, but then we will also look at how, and specific books and art, of course, but then we will look at how contemporary African-American musicians like Janelle Monáe and Kendrick Lamar, etc., reference that Pan-Africanism in their critiques and in their commentaries on contemporary.
Are you going to allow staff and fellow faculty members to audit your course?
Well, yes, with a caveat. There will be an audition process.
Got it.
Yeah, it's a very a small and intimate community. So
of course. You're planning and offering this class because planned study abroad has kind of been put on a bit of a hold. I have been encouraged, especially in recent weeks, with the diligence that Center is approaching this health crisis with. And, we had a very interesting spring semester. I wonder if you could speak to that shift and how your classroom dynamic may have changed or perhaps not have changed. And what were the things that you did as a professor to really foster, I think so many people associate Center with this incredibly close and intentional faculty-student relationship. And we couldn't share space. So talk us through your spring and how that materialized in a very unexpected way.
Yes, unprecedented this year.
Unprecedented. Merriam-Webster's word of the year. I'm calling it now.
I think I'm with you. I would say that, so this spring semester, the subjects that I taught were all choirs. So having ensembles move online, obviously, and for obvious reasons, really kind of freaked me out a little bit. But I looked at what the role is of those ensembles within students' lives. Why do we do what we do? And as a musician, as somebody who studied for 9-10 years after high school, I almost there's an adoration and almost an adulation of beauty and perfection, and those you've sung in choirs, those moments the harmonies line up and you have overtones and the whole world is just one organism beating with one heartbeat. And so that's a very kind of product-oriented way of looking at what we do. And I realized that is, that's how I've been conditioned to think, because it is so awesome. But in this moment, I took the opportunity to look at the mechanics of why we do what we do and kind of the process rather than the product. And it's like, well, we have a community. We have a place specifically perhaps where people fit in that don't fit into others or don't want to voluntarily fit into other social organizations or structures. It's a moment to just relax and be in your body after being in your head for a day at center. It's and so looking at all these different aspects, and then we just had what seemed to be a pretty meaningful online experience where we met and we talked and discussed our own identities as creative beings and what that balance means and why it's important. And we had coffee hours where people shared their stories and their lives and their pets and their plants. And then we did have some virtual choir projects where we recorded the alma mater as a going away gift for President Rausch. And then and also some of our own repertoire that I then put together in these virtual choirs, which was quite a process. But
yeah, how many hours did you spend on that?
I think the calculation was something like 260. It was a lot. It was a labor of love. And being able to have students be that vulnerable and send me a recording just of themselves singing and engaging with them in that way was very meaningful. I also made myself more available online. So specifically Instagram messaging, which
whatever works, right?
Yeah, I hate to sometimes people go the extra mile and then everybody else feels that they're expected to do the same. And there are some, there are some personalities that maybe don't want to. You don't want to have that level of contact with. But I made myself available, and I said, if you're ever overwhelmed, if you ever need to gripe, or you ever just need to talk. And so I had students texting me and kind of social media in that form became another form of community. And then we had GroupMe chats. There was a big resurgence during Tiger King.
I bet.
Of all kinds of personality quizzes, etc. So we just did everything we could to stay together as a community and as friends, and made as much music as we could in the process. And now I am part of intercollegiate efforts to figure out how we can strengthen what we've already done in the fall.
Yeah, I think it's been so heartening as an alum myself. I do not envy the position that any student or faculty member was put in through the spring, and yet I felt such this wave of happiness in a very weird, disjointed way to know that the sanctity of that relationship was being so intentionally preserved by our faculty members who, I think when you say, like you don't want to do something because, other folks are going to feel like they have to, I think that every center professor in their own way pulls out respective stops that others don't. So where someone might text you, it might be, hey, come over to my house if you're still in town and we'll have a socially distant gathering in my front yard. I think that the variety of ways that professors employ to connect with students is intentional and meets them where they are. And in that light, I think just as much as center students enjoy that closeness with their professors, that it's reciprocal. It's not just, the professors being good salespeople or, being like approachability is part of the job. I think that there is a lot, and I know this of you, there is genuine interest to connect with folks because it is something that continues far beyond graduation, what is it that you like about center students that makes you want to build this type of relationship with them?
Well, I will say two things before I answer your question. I'll keep it
Great.
brief.
Say whatever you want.
So the first thing that happened behind the scenes that maybe people aren't aware of is immediately when the switch to online happened, there were support groups and social media groups of center professors, and our Center for Teaching and Learning immediately jumped in with resources and studies and suggestions. Robin Cutright, who is the director, just worked so overtime and so much to make sure that every single professor, we have professors in their 20s and we have professors in their 70s, and that everybody is ready to make the switch and continue that one-on-one quality education that we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of what you may have experienced as joy and magic is the result of a lot of work behind the scenes. I was very impressed to see from all of my colleagues what they were willing to do to make this work. And especially if you think, scientists have different challenges in this than, sociologists do, than people who teach foreign languages do.
And they're all challenges. They're all, no one had it easy.
Yeah. So that was really extraordinary. And then the second part that I would say is when students are in front of me in the classroom, because it's center and because it's almost like a contract. They walk in and that they chose to come to this school because in large part, they want that communication with you. They came here because we are known for that one-on-one kind of special eyeball to eyeball communication, right?
Right.
Buber called it the I and thou. And so whether I'm staring at a Zoom screen with, 15 students, or whether I'm standing in front of them, my center DNA functions in such a way that it's just my natural impulse to make sure that every single person is involved and gets a chance to talk. And it's a pedagogy, and it is something that center professors know how to do, right? And if we didn't have that interest and that passion, then
you might be working somewhere else.
Yeah,
and by might, I mean probably would be.
You probably would be. So yes. So what it is about center students that I appreciate and that I'm drawn to is that they're like me. In that they have
Say more.
They have celebrities. They're just like us. They have a wide array of interests, and one of the pleasures for me in being an advisor, because we are academic advisors to groups of students, is this idea, which is almost unique to the USA, of liberal arts education, of not specializing from the get-go and having this opportunity to experience these different fields and these different disciplines, and having those structures and techniques strengthen whatever it is that you choose to do in the end with your life or with your career. And so center students are curious. There is not a single class where I don't get asked a question to which I don't know the answer, because it's just so unique or so interdisciplinary that I have to honestly say, well, I need to think about it, but let's discuss it. What do we think? And I think it's that way with everything that we teach, is this idea of bringing together and our different disciplines, our different interests, and applying them. And what is very exciting now with the new general ed system or what do we call it, framework, that gets implemented from this year on, is that that's an even more organic way that's going to happen. And with the capstone courses, and just apply what you've learned to discussing and analyzing this discipline. And that is absolutely something that is vital, I think, to to living and thriving in the time that we live in. So yes, as wide and unfocused as my interests were as a student, now I get to be in a classroom full of highly intelligent, highly curious people who have those questions. And because I dare to dip my toe into a world that's inhabited probably by people younger than me in terms of pop culture, I'm literally out of my depth all the time. And that kind of creative spark and friction just is the dynamo that propels everything forward. So it's a very I guess they call it a flipped classroom in in educational speak, and for me there's a lot of that at center, where we learn from the students, but in that process they learn the process and structure and technique,
Right.
Especially in what I teach and what I do.
Yeah. I have two more questions for you, but want to remind folks, if they have any questions they would like answered live, they're welcome to use the chat feature and just click in there and we'll see it pop up. But if not, if you have questions afterwards, you're more than welcome to email me or email Johann, and we'd be more than happy to be in touch. But I have two more questions. If we don't have any more, then we'll wrap after that. My first, so following up on, specifically thinking about what you teach and this broader framework, the DLM framework, looking at what we do to ensure structurally that students are in that liberal arts and sciences mode. One of the things that I feel is most often overlooked in environments that don't have what we have is the fine arts program, right? It's often seen as an addition or an option. And I know from my own experience that both in terms of academic and co-curricular options, the arts are by far the most robust of any program that's offered at the college in terms of the variety of things you can take advantage of, whether you want to dive in deep and stay in deep, or whether you want to pursue something completely different academically but still want to remain engaged. I wonder if you could speak to that breadth of opportunity for students who are interested in music at Center. Very, very focused or very unfocused, as we've termed.
Sure. Yeah. So our program, for example, and some other programs have done it since, but I think we were one of the first, recently completely redesigned our major to allow for much more flexibility. Much of how music used to work is you needed to learn this body of work and theory that is all based on 3 European countries from 1550 to 1850. And then with the 1 or 2 electives or opportunities that you have, you can branch out somewhere else. And so we really looked at what you are able to do through technology these days. That wasn't the case 30 or 40 years. What the skills are that actual musicians who are employed in the field need, and how that lines up with how music has been taught at liberal arts colleges. And so we made some pretty drastic changes where we have different tracks that you can specialize in, whether you want to specialize in classical performance or songwriting or technology and recording. I'm sure there are things that I'm leaving out here, but whatever your interests are, you can create your major within them with a practical application and the theory that's behind it. And as part of that, we have a new gateway course called Foundations and Worldviews of Music, which most students take in their first or second year. And it really is, it's fascinating to see the process of needing to write and think critically about music for the first time. It's something that we just do without thinking. But to start turning that clinical and critical lens on it. So yes, we have songwriters, we have we have students who have recorded albums as their final projects, as their senior projects. We have classical performers, we have graduates who go to study opera, and then we also have graduates who become, you know, neuroscientists or you know, surgeons. So these experiences are really in our program, and also in the fine arts program, tailored to what students want. And we have these opportunities for auditions for music scholarships beforehand. And as part of that, there is a second kind of advisorship and mentorship throughout your time at center, where that person will help you and encourage you to do what you wish to do. At center, whatever instrument you want to learn to play, we will provide you with an instructor, and you will be able, you know, to play it. The other part of it that I would say is our interests. Then, because of how center is structured, we get to teach it. So my colleague Larry Batinsky is a Deadhead, and he teaches a really popular course on the Grateful Dead. And he's, you know, taken students abroad and to Bali, and he has like Indian rhythms ensembles. We have African drumming and African percussion ensembles. We've had Afro-Brazilian ensembles, funk and jazz bands, orchestra, chamber music, roots, Kentucky ensemble. So it really spans the it's a broad scope of music making. And the way that the syllabus and the curriculum works is that it is all valued in equal form, which is not always the case. And so we've had quite a few peer institutions starting to contact us saying, tell us about this new major of yours, because we are now in the process of doing the same thing. So I think people realize, especially in liberal arts, that we need to restructure to make things more fluid for students. Okay. Your Absolutely. Second question was, so in making it more fluid, it means that there are more entry points as well for non-music specialists to have this experience in what they are interested in. So all of these courses have students who are going to be majors, but also students who are not. And with the new Gen Ed, there's this tag or this designation for arts exploration.
I believe that's where it falls.
Is that what it is?
I think so. I say that with perhaps. Yeah, let's say yes.
I'm in the middle of my summer break, so I apologize if it's the wrong term. Sure. And so as part of the option to take those, and it will count towards those requirements as well. So in loosening some of these larger where you can play around and you can have your curated based on, I think that is really going to fortify the center experience even more, and the faculty are very excited about it.
Well, and we sure do love our faculty for putting in the legwork and making it a reality for our students. It's really great that we get the chance to, be the beneficiaries of the hard work that our faculty do to make it more accessible to our students. Mm-hmm. Closing thought, I will ask you, and this is my last question. What is it that excites you about being a professor at Center College in July of 2020? What about it? What about this experience right now? In the summer, going into this period of potential uncertainty, what gets you up and going and excited to do your job at Center?
I think a part of it is what I already kind of touched on, is that we thrive on this one-on-one education. And so this is my week that I've given myself off. But next week I'm starting to shape this first year course that I'm teaching, a DLM course. And I'm thinking about how to do that. And I think that a lot of the changes and the retooling that we're doing for potential hybrid, because some of the students may not be on campus, a lot of this may impact how we teach after the pandemic, and just become more tech savvy or more accessible. And so that's kind of exciting for me, to think about, and to just, it's a bit of a disruption, but it also forces me to reevaluate. I've now been at Center for 5 years. I'm going into my 6th year, and it gives me an opportunity to rethink and reevaluate some things that I just do automatically. So that's exciting for me. The fact that I get to teach something that I'm very excited about, in this DLM. I loved teaching the humanities format as well, but now I get to teach this thing that I love, to teach in the fall, and figure out how that would work in this hybrid format. That's exciting to me. And I would also just say that I feel very privileged. I feel privileged to be employed, and not only to be employed, but to be employed in a job that I love, at an institution that I love. And I absolutely recognize the level of privilege that I have to be able to say that in this moment in time. And so that gratitude, quite honestly, is probably the biggest contributor to all of it. And our students have been incredibly empathetic and understanding. But I think because they see the effort, I think they they realize that that
this isn't what anybody planned.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I know some of my colleagues went way above and beyond in the spring, and they're spending their summer break, quote unquote, to prepare for the fall. And then of course the staff, at Center are working nonstop to make sure that everybody has that experience and a safe experience. So everybody is just full on into the in this preparation, and that drive. It's equal parts responsibility. You can't be the one to slack,
Right.
But it also inspires me because everybody is in it together.
Yeah. What a great note to end on. Thank you so much for taking the time. I learned something. I hope the folks tuning in, whether live or not live, took something away from this. So grateful to have you as a colleague and friend in this work. And hope you enjoy the rest of your week off, knowing that will propel you into the hard but good work ahead.
Yes, thank you. And thank you. I also want to thank you and your office and everything that you're doing. It's absolutely a partnership. It's not a partnership. Sorry, I take that back. You do the heavy lifting, and we're very, very, very thankful.
It is very much a partnership. Don't sell yourself short on that one. But thank you. Thanks for tuning in. And if y'all have any questions, you know where to find us. You can always email admission@center.edu or give us a call at 859-238-5350. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.
Bye-bye.